I'm Dr. Erica Bove, and welcome to the Love and Science podcast. I'm your host, and also the founder of Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility. I'm so excited you're here today. With over a decade of experience helping thousands of women just like you, I empower professional women to build their families with confidence and compassion. Let's dive in. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Love and Science podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is circadian rhythms and the influence on the reproductive system and the reproductive function. So, circadian rhythms, we learned about them in medical school. For those of us who are physicians, what are they? Basically, they are biological processes which reflect a 24-hour cycle. So this can pertain to things like sleep, like core body temperature, like blood pressure regulation, and also even hormonal secretion and regulation. And so when we think about many of us, whether we're physicians or maybe attorneys or engineers with jobs at late hours, right? Like many of our bodies are not allowed, based on our work schedules, to have a regular schedule. And one of my good friends, Dr. Funke Brown, she is a sleep doctor, sleep specialist. We talk all the time about the really intimate interplay between hormones and sleep and how important that is. So I wanted to review some of the mechanisms and the data regarding circadian rhythms and reproductive outcomes. So why are these circadian rhythms so important? Well, when we have altered sleep schedules, for instance, long call shifts or maybe shift work that varies from day to day, month to month, this can have tremendous hormonal effects, right? We know that women who have irregular sleep cycles and circadian rhythms, they can have anovulation and amenorrhea because what happens is that the pulse generator gets affected, the GnRH hormone secretion is altered, that affects the pituitary hormones, that affects the ovaries. And so thinking about it, we know that there's these clock genes, right? Super interesting to think about. There are these genes that are influenced by the light exposure that we have, perhaps even the humidity, right? We have these different changes in seasons. And also even our eating patterns can signal our bodies about, what they're supposed to do next. And so in the hypothalamus, there's this area called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. I remember learning about it in medical school. I was obsessed with neuroanatomy, right? And what happens is that these areas get dysregulated when we have alterations in the light that we see, right? Even the invention of the light bulb affected our overall health, which is fascinating. And also even like whether we eat breakfast or not could have an influence on some of these functions as well. So thinking about how in women, right, how ovulation can truly be affected by hormone changes related to sleep disturbances, I think that's really powerful. And also, we know that testosterone levels are lower, both in animals and humans, for men where there are sleep disruptions. And I think that's just really powerful. There is even data to suggest in rodents that the semen analysis is worse when rodents' circadian rhythms are disrupted. And I think that's quite powerful, right? Everyone's like, why are sperm numbers decreasing around the world, right? So maybe there is a link between the, worse sleep that we're getting and also the secretion of these hormones and the ultimate effect on the sperm quality. Just a thought, but just think about it. There's some biological plausibility there. So that's really the first mechanism is alteration in hormone secretion, right? The second mechanism is how when we don't have regular sleep patterns and our circadian rhythms get messed up, that then activates our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, right? And so that's considered a stressful circumstance, right? Our bodies are trying to stay in a rhythm. They're trying to respond to the environment, but the body sees that as a potential threat. And when our HPA axis gets engaged and activated, that increases our, corticosteroids. And we know that that has the effect of decreasing the sex steroid secretion and also increasing inflammation. And so, yes, it is good that our HPA axis can get activated in times of stress, but when we are chronically sleep deprived, when we are, burning the candle at both ends, so to speak, when we are, going into the hospital and maybe getting out at 2 a.m. and then the next day we have a different shift, that's very confusing to our bodies, which like predictability. And Bodies know when it's a stressful time, right? We know this from data. When our bodies are stressed out, the body's like, oh, it's not a great time to be getting pregnant. So even if we're overriding things with IVF, the body knows, and these disturbances can really affect the HPA axis and what that does, with the interplay with our reproductive system. There's also evidence that when we have disturbed circadian rhythms as pertains to sleep, that can decrease our melatonin production, and that can affect a lot of the peripheral systems. And so the way that it works with the clock genes is that it affects that nucleus in the brain, right? And then there are both neuronal and hormonal influences on these more peripheral circadian target organs. And so you can see effects in the liver, you can see effects in the kidneys, you can see effects in the heart, you can see effects in the reproductive organs, because we are wired, we are one system, right? We're not just the sum of all these little parts. Like, we truly are connected whole human beings. And so, really, really interesting to think about how our melatonin is important, and that helps us with our sleep. And when we have less melatonin production, there's actually some evidence that has suggested that is related to increased risk of miscarriage and also reduce uterine receptivity. And so this question of why are my high quality embryos not implanting, we think, oh, we can we could just keep working as hard because we got to serve all the people. I think there may be a good argument for reducing call, having more regular schedules, all those different things that would actually take good care of ourselves to restore our circadian rhythms as we are trying to get pregnant. Okay, so hello, my loves. I am so excited to share this news with you. If you are a female physician navigating the fertility journey and you want a structured, evidence-based plan, I have created a free resource for you. It's called the Physician Fertility Roadmap. I have created a guide to help you optimize your chances of pregnancy and a successful outcome over the next 6 to 12 months. Check out the link in the show notes. Love you. Bye. Let's talk about stress for a second. I know this is a very controversial topic, but stress alters the circadian clock. It just does. And so people always say, what's the role of stress in fertility? Well, yes, infertility is inherently stressful, but that also affects the circadian clock. When the circadian clock is affected, then that increases truly not just our emotional stress, but our body's experience of stress. And so if we're thinking about it, what can we do to optimize our outcomes? What can we do to feel better? Even in the setting of IVF, like I said, where we're overriding a lot of these things, there's really good evidence that if we can get better sleep, our bodies can have more predictable schedules. There's even some evidence that eating breakfast can be helpful to the overall process, right? Because it helps our circadian system stay in check, that can then decrease the HPA activation, reduce inflammation, remind our body that we're safe, remind our body that's a good time to be pregnant, right? Like it sort of truly decreases our stress response and allows our physiology to work better. So if you're listening to this and you do have a schedule that is irregular or unpredictable, or maybe you're an OBGYN and babies are born, we know, at all different hours, and you're trying to get pregnant. I mean, I think in general for overall health, it's good for us to try and get regular sleep as much as we can. Obviously, there's good data for that. But in particular on the fertility journey, it is very, very important to do the best we can. And that might mean setting boundaries. That might mean talking with our supervisors, because really we get one shot at this, right? Like, we have our reproductive years and then they're over. And my job is to empower you to make the best choices that you can. So I hope this little talk about the clock genes and the circadian rhythms was educational. I always learn when I prepare for these talks, but I really think there's definite links to the reproductive system, both in terms of hormone secretion, HPA activation, inflammation, and likely even, implantation issues as well as increased risk of miscarriage. And this question of like, why do female physicians have worse outcomes compared to, non-physicians? I think this may be part of the picture. So thank you for listening. As always, tell me what other sciencey topics you want to hear about, because I will go to the literature and I will bring some clarity to the situation. You know how much I love you. Bye.